Alcibiades was born around 450 BC in Athens. His father was Cleinias, an Athenian politician, and his mother was Deinomisch, a descendant of the aristocratic family Alcmaeonidae. Alcibiades was also the nephew of Pericles, who was a prominent statesman, orator, and general during the Golden Age of Athens. In his teen years, Alcibiades was known to be irresponsible and a free spirit. This attitude persisted into his maturity. During this time, he was also the pupil and friend of Socrates, a famous Greek philosopher. In the early years of his life, rumors of war flew around Athens and eventually erupted into real war. In his 20s, Alcibiades witnessed the political struggle between the conservative and dull politicians like Nicias and the more exuberant hyper-patriotic politicians like Cleon. The more vivacious politicians seemed to win over the crowd more if they were a clever speaker. Alcibiades noticed this and used it to his advantage in his political career. Alcibiades' first real political venture was in 420 BC, where he stopped a treaty between Athens and Sparta taking place by deceiving the Spartan delegation. 420 BC was when he got elected as a strategos at the minimum age of 30, which made him part of the strategoi, an influential military council in Athens who proposed agendas to the assembly. Alcibiades convinced them to change their requirements for the treaty, and as soon as they did so, he turned on them for being two-faced. Alcibiades had already begun to mess up political proceedings, and he was already succeeding. In 419, he was re-elected for his strategos position. Nicias became one of his political enemies, since they had very different views and approaches to politics. Alcibiades' first fall from grace was in 415 BC. When he was about to leave on his Sicilian expedition, the busts of Hermes, the messenger of the gods, around the city-state, also known as Herme, were found to be mutilated. In the confusion and panic, Alcibiades was accused for being a perpetrator of the scheme. He called for an immediate trial, perhaps to prove his innocence, but the city denied this request and sent him to Sicily anyway. He learned that if he went back to Athens after his expedition, he would be sentenced to death. So, instead, he headed to Sparta. He began to help Sparta instead of Athens. He revealed Athens' secrets, and advised Sparta to take over the Athenian fortress of Decelea, which they did in 413 BC. While this was happening, the Athenian expedition to Sicily that Alcibiades created ended in disaster, killing Nicias. During this time Alcibiades also seduced the wife of the Spartan king Agis II. When the king found out about it, Alcibiades fled to Persia, who were enemies of Sparta. His relationship with Persia was not very secure, as he didn't have a lot to gain from his alliance with them, but he had no other options. Alcibiades wanted to create an alliance between Persia and Athens so he could come back to Athens, but the only way he could make that happen is if he made the oligarchy give way to a democracy in Athens, as he knew the newly changed government would welcome Alcibiades back as a hero of democracy. So, he supported and worked towards the oligarch revolution in Athens. Once Athens gave way to a democracy, Alcibiades led a few military victories against Sparta in places such as Hellespont, also known as Abydos. In 407 BCE, Alcibiades returned to Athens, and was regarded as a hero. All charges against him were dropped, and he was appointed as strategos autocrator, so he was a general like in the past, except he was above all the other generals. This was the only time that happened in the history of Athens. Alcibiades became the commander-in-chief of the Athenian forces. When Alcibiades left the troops in Samos briefly unattended and in someone else's care, the Spartans soundly defeated them in 406 BCE. Alcibiades was blamed for the defeat due to negligence, and was not re-elected. He went to live in Thrace, but still had a surprising influence on the politics in Athens by advising individuals that held power, and assured that no peace between Athens and Sparta would be met. Athens began to get careless in the Peloponnesian War, and ignored Alcibiades' warnings to be mindful. Sparta won the Peloponnesian War in 404 BCE. Alcibiades fled Thrace, and was murdered later that year in Phrygia by the Spartans' command. Alcibiades clearly led an eventful life with many twists and turns, but how and why did he make the decisions that led to this said life? It's clear that Alcibiades was a very arrogant and free-willed person, but was that all there was to his character? No one can be exactly sure what mindset Alcibiades was in, but many historians believe that Alcibiades knew exactly what he was doing despite him appearing spontaneous and impulsive. It is possible that Alcibiades possessed the ability to predict what would play out under given circumstances, and that he was a calculated gambler. Due to the immense pressure on him from many sides at almost all times, he had to make every move with deliberation and daring in order to stay alive. He always got what he wanted, even if he had to wait for it. One example of this is when he plotted the oligarch revolution, not because he felt incredibly strongly towards having a democratic state, but so he could go back to Athens and be accepted, as he knew he wouldn't be welcomed back if the government remained as an oligarchy. However, another possible theory is that Alcibiades was just a very skilled opportunist, who reached his decisions according to how the situation shifted. Though it can be well supported that Alcibiades planned for many of the events that took place during his life, some of the situations he found himself in seemed impossible to predict. This theory would be backed up by his willingness to switch loyalties and political standings at the drop of a hat. To avoid his unexpected death sentence in Athens, he went to Sparta and revealed Athenian secrets. It seems implausible that he would be aware of getting framed for a crime in Athens, so his actions that followed couldn't have been 100% planned. Either way you look at it, Alcibiades was a smart, self-serving politician and general that used his charms and quick wits to get what he wanted.